Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Personal Leadership Podcast.com. I am Thomas Rex, and with me I have Michael Lassen, somewhere from Mallorca. Today I'm online with international entrepreneur and motivational speaker Eric Edmeades. And I'm sure some of you already know, Eric will be coming to Copenhagen on September the 12th. It's very exciting. We have two events going on the 12th in Copenhagen, and he will also visit Aarhus on the 12th. So, and some of you probably also know that Eric is one of our top speakers at the Elevate 2014 this year, which is, you know, the biggest Nordic personal business event taking place in October. So, so anyway, Michael and I thought it would be a good idea to interview Eric now that he's coming around, and give you guys an idea of what to expect. So, before we start the interview, maybe we should say hi to Michael now. I've been talking a lot. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Thomas. How are you? How are you, Eric?
Michael, that's great sound effects. That's Michael pretending there's an earthquake happening.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
All right. So anyway, before we start the interview, on a personal note, let me start by saying that I'm really excited that Eric is coming back to Denmark, because he is truly an excellent speaker, and he has shared the stage with some of the biggest names in our industry, such as serial entrepreneur Richard Branson, and of course my personal hero Tony Robbins, who he's been working with on the business mastery programs. You will learn that Eric's talks, they are always entertaining, funny, but a lot more than that. He always provides really good practical information, you know, hands-on, how to actually take his input and go and use it. And that's so important these days, that you don't just get a lot of inspiration, you're actually being taught how to go and use it. And so, you know, he's a real business owner. He started, he has bought, he has executed, you know, sold companies in a variety of industries. I'm not even sure I know all of them, but I know for sure that he's been in the mobile industry, medical, I believe. I for sure know that he owned a Hollywood special effects studio that worked on the Pirates of the Caribbean, the Transformers, Iron Man. So that being said, I'm really excited to welcome Eric to this interview. So Eric, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome to our Personal Leadership Podcast, and it's great fun to have you with us.
I always enjoy our little discourses. One of my favorite interviews of all of last year was the one that you and I did on the boat between Copenhagen and Malmö.
That was something out of the ordinary. We
you
actually
know what? Just because there are people on here who maybe haven't seen the interview, I'll let you know. I'll post a link to that on my Facebook page. It's a fun interview that we did on a boat. We had done an event in Copenhagen together, and then we were off to Malmö. Instead of driving, we decided, let's just get a boat and zoom across the water. And it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous day. So I'll post that on my Facebook page for anybody who wants to watch that video. It was really good.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had a fun time that day for sure. So anyway, let's get started. I prepared a number of questions, and so has Michael. Are you ready?
I am.
Yeah, because you know we have a limited time with you, so we just want to get ahead and get started. Okay. So you know, the first question, you know, I'm also a serial entrepreneur, not at your level, but you know, I've been around for 20 years though, and started a little bit of businesses myself. I'd like to ask you, what was the very first business that you started?
Yeah. So technically, my first real business was a company that was involved in data capture equipment, barcode scanning equipment, wireless network installation, and the maintenance of equipment that was involved in, say, retail and logistics management. So we were you know, our clients were big retail companies, big logistics companies, manufacturers, airlines, and that sort of thing. Although, I mean, that makes it sound like a very big company. I started that company in my living room, you know, in 1997, and And when I sold it 9 years later, we had about, I don't know, say 35 or so employees. So it was a very fun ride. It was a good business. I will say, though, that I did have some businesses earlier than that. Like I had my shoveling snow business, and I had my raking leaves business, and then I had like selling things on the sidewalk because I was lucky enough to live on a busy road. So as a very small kid, I would go and collect seashells and sell ashtrays in front of my house. You know, I guess I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial focus long before I found out that I could actually legally have businesses.
Yeah. Once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I actually crashed my first 3 businesses. What can you share with us some of the biggest mistakes you've been making in business?
Yeah, you know, it's funny you asked that. I'm actually in the middle of recording a series, a video series that we're going to be publishing on YouTube called 99 Business Mistakes I've Made So You Don't Have to. Oh. And the reason being is that I'm a very big believer that the only real mistake in business is to make unoriginal mistakes. That's the only real mistake. I mean, my feeling is that if you make a mistake that nobody else has ever made before, that you've never made before, then that's not a mistake. It's an experiment, and I'm okay with experiments. Where I get frustrated is when I find myself repeating mistakes that I've made before, or perhaps even worse, is making mistakes that other people have made and warned me about, because that's just a waste of time and money and resources and so on. So, you know, I tend to think in terms of trying to make original mistakes wherever possible, and I'm also a big fan of the expression that good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So, you know, in other words, to create really good experience, to create really good judgment is going to take some mistakes. And there's a number that I've made over the years. You know, I just did an interview with the team in Lithuania that I'll be seeing in next week, and one of the mistakes I mentioned to them is just, you know, sometimes being too optimistic. Like, for example, being too optimistic that that the person I've just interviewed is the right person. You know, sometimes business owners, particularly creative business owners, are fundamentally optimistic, and so, you know, you interview somebody, you like them, and you think, oh, well, I feel good about I feel good about their potential, I feel good about having met them, and then that might give you the feeling like you don't need to call the references, or you don't need to do a background check, and that leads to all manner of problems. I have now learned firmly that the better I feel about somebody at the beginning, the more I'm going to do a background check. So that's that's definitely one of the mistakes that I've made more times than I would like to say. There's many. We could fill a whole night with mistakes I've made in business.
Michael?
Yeah, Eric, what do you see as some of the most typical mistakes that an entrepreneur makes these days?
You know, it's interesting. One of them is there's one mistake that I think is a horrible, horrible mistake to make in business, or the greatest gift you could ever give yourself, and it's all a matter of how you play it. And this is the mistake. The mistake is starting a business around your core skill sets. So I remember years ago, 20 years ago, listening to Michael Gerber speaking about this very concept, and he said, listen, what happens is somebody, you know, they're a mechanic in a car shop, and one day they get mad at their boss and they quit their job. What kind of company do they start?
Yeah, another mechanic shop.
Another mechanic shop. And now the problem is, before they had a job fixing cars, now they have 10 jobs. They have to run the shop, they have to hire the people, they have to do the accounting, they have to clean the place, and they have to fix the cars. And
right.
So what really ends up happening is that when you build a business built around your own passions or your own skill set, you create a business that's going to become dependent upon you. And then you don't have a business at all. You have self-employment. And not only do you have self-employment, but often you're doing 10 jobs instead of only one. And generally speaking, not only are you not making 10 times as much money, but often people are making less money than when they had a job because they're losing money or they're having to invest money and so on. So in one sense, I think that can be a tragic mistake that people can make in business.
Right.
On the other hand, if you do it properly, it can be the greatest gift you ever give yourself. And here's why. If you can start a business around your passions, around what you truly love, around what you love to do minute by minute, day by day, if you build your business around an activity that you will forget to eat because you love it so much,
Right.
and then build a business around you that allows you to spend your time doing that, that is the entrepreneurial holy grail.
But Eric, you know, this is a super interesting discussion we're having already, because some of the things that I often see with our entrepreneurs as part of our network here in Speakers Club and Elevate is that people, they know, they've seen the light regarding, you know, follow your passion and do what you love and become good at it. But you know, very often they forget that it's not enough to be passionate. It's not enough to be happy at work. You need business skills. You need the right focus. You need the right direction. It's the combination that makes the success. Can you comment on that?
You're absolutely right, and you need prioritization balance. It was really fascinating. So I was doing a talk at the Transformational Leadership Council, where I'm a member, and it's an organization of speakers and authors with, you know, people, Jack Canfield, John Gray, Janet Atwood, who's going to be at Elevate, and I was speaking about, in a sense, evolutionary biology. And one of the things that I pointed out is that stress is an unbelievably dangerous thing. Now, we already know that. We know that stress can kill people. I mean, it causes hypertension, it suppresses the immune system. So stress is a very dangerous thing. Right. One of the things that we hadn't discussed is why stress is dangerous that way. And that's another conversation for another day. As I was discussing this, however, I was talking about the fact that sometimes stress isn't even painful, it's still stressful. So, for example, when somebody is truly following their passion, and it was so funny because as I said that, I was walking along the stage and I stood right in front of Janet. And I said, when somebody's truly following their passion, isn't it possible they still work too much? And of course, you know Janet as well as I do. Does she sometimes work too much?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. We all do. We all do. But the point is that when there's that much passion behind it, it means that you can lose touch sometimes with two things. As you said, the business skills required to build a company that supports your passion, and also the true north compass inside you that makes sure that you don't allow your passion to prevent you spending time with your family, taking care of your health, and just nurturing your soul in a bunch of different ways. So I'm a very big fan of helping people with their passions identify solid business skills, solid practical things they can do to move themselves out of all the jobs they don't like doing so they can focus on what they love to do inside the business, which is incidentally the best way to create attraction.
That is what you call business.
Eric, would it be fair to say that one of the reasons is that that when you're really good at something, you're in your comfort zone, and in order to have success in business, you need to be able to function outside of your comfort zone, or in your growth zone?
Yeah, I think, Michael, there is some truth to that. I mean, you know, I think fundamentally quitting a job and starting a company requires stepping. What I'm more concerned about, or what I'm more curious about, if we think of it like this, if we consider you have two entrepreneurs, and one of the entrepreneurs is just, you know, they love their business, they're working hard all the time, and maybe, you know, a third of the time they're following their passion, but the other, you know, 2/3 of the time they're doing accounting and HR interviews and designing marketing campaigns that they're bored by and all that kind of stuff. Then you have this other entrepreneur, and that entrepreneur has set their business up so that 100%, or let's say 90% of their time is spent following their passion. Right. Which entrepreneur is going to be fundamentally more attractive to employees, joint venture partners, investors, suppliers, lenders, and customers?
Right.
Clearly the second one.
Absolutely. And you make it sound so easy, but yet it's so difficult for many people. You know, the whole outsourcing part and letting go and hiring people to do things that initially you feel you're actually better than they than they are, right?
You know, Thomas, you're dead right, and that you know, there's a couple of patterns that we have to look at here. The first thing is that there is when you consider the way society has developed. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that everybody had to work very hard just to keep society running. You know, the industrial age. It was like even school today is still set up on this industrial age concept of the bell rings, you sit to work. The bell rings, you have a break. The bell rings, you get back to work. It's all about hard work and shifts and sacrifice. And so some of that is kind of ingrained in our thinking about the way business needs to be. And I really think there are two things that are missing. The one is there's an understanding that business freedom is a reality. It is something that absolutely many, many people create in their businesses. They own a business that doesn't own them. They own a business that enhances their life and gives them more money and gives them more time. And then there are other people who start a business that becomes their boss. So
Right.
there's a psychological piece that's missing. But then, as you said, there's also some skills. There's some distinctions. And one of those things is, you mentioned it just now, it's hard sometimes to hand a job over to somebody who will not do that job as well as you know you could do it. That's
Exactly.
a very difficult thing to do, except when people start to really think it through. And this is one of the best ways to explain it. Thomas, give me a job that you are better at than somebody. No, you might not want to say that because some of your team might be listening. But is it possible that an entrepreneur, for example, might not like doing their accounting, but they're afraid to give that accounting to somebody else because they're good at it, and not somebody an account? Let's face it, that has to be done properly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Now let's imagine that entrepreneur is like an 80%. They're not really an accountant, but they're 80%. They're really good. They'll do an 80% job on that, and they've hired somebody, and they're concerned that that person can only do 60% quality. Well, here's the thing that they're not remembering. As an entrepreneur with 10 jobs, you know, manager, HR person, janitor, IT tech, salesperson, well, that means even if they are capable of 80 in accounting, that's not what they're actually going to deliver, because they're having to spread their time out over so many things that them doing the job is not comparable to somebody else doing the job. Somebody else doing it not as well as them is actually still better, because they're actually going to devote their time to it. And then, of course, the second piece is the more they work at it, the better they'll get. And if the entrepreneur doesn't make that leap at all, then all they've done is created some kind of weird business slavery for themselves rather than owning a business.
Good point. Good point. Last time you were here, Eric, you thrilled the audience with your inception marketing tips and tricks and stories. I gotta say that was wonderful. And you're not only a great entrepreneur, you're also a great marketeer. And I know that you will be sharing this on stage when you come around in 2 weeks' time. But could you talk just a little bit about inception marketing already now, please?
Absolutely. So the background here is, first of all, I should say that inception marketing is a sort of collection or synthesis of a bunch of different marketing, methodologies that we really refined and put into one model that we call inception marketing. And the name is a big clue as to what inception marketing is, because the word inception means the beginning. You know, the inception of a business is the beginning. The inception of an idea is the beginning. And inception marketing is designed around creating strategic marketing campaigns that create a feeling in the prospect that buying your product or service was their own idea, because the inception took place inside them. Instead of pushing them and persuading them, we're attracting them, and that's what really inception marketing is all about. So one of the things that I think was really fun when we did that event both in Copenhagen and on Aarhus is, I demonstrate to the audience that most companies are designing their marketing to appeal to try and capture their very small share of the existing buyers. In marketing terms, we might call them the low-hanging fruit. And the problem is that model seems really easy, because you place an ad, somebody calls, and they buy. Except it's not quite so easy, because first of all, not so many people call. And secondly, when they call, they're looking for the very best price they can get, because they were already buying. And I think what really impressed people both in Aarhus and in Copenhagen last time was I then 30 people out of 1,000, it was 500 people out of 1,000. And that's where the real magic takes place. So I'm really looking forward to bringing that back to Denmark and really showing people how it works.
Eric, sorry to be the one to tell you.
Yes.
I think you fell out the last 40 seconds. I think you fell out. At least I couldn't hear you. Michael, if it was, can you not? If it was the same with you?
Oh, I could hear
you. You repeat the last. Okay. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's just me, Michael. But
yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Look, I'll repeat in sort of short form. And the short form is, these days, there are so many different ways to market to people. Television, radio, magazine, internet, trade shows, public speaking, salespeople, telemarketing. There's a million different ways to reach people. And most people will tell you that what's hard for them is that those ways don't work anymore. That's what everybody's saying. Well, TV doesn't work anymore. Magazines don't work anymore. Radio doesn't work anymore. And here's the good news, is that all of those things still work extremely well. What isn't working anymore is the old model of messaging, the old design of an advertisement, the old model of marketing. When we get into strategically or psychologically strategic marketing creation, then those things start working, and they work way better than the previous model did. And so we'll definitely demonstrate that very solidly in Copenhagen, but not just demonstrate it. We're going to show people practically how they can do it in their business. And I'm really excited about doing that. I think I might have shared this story with you before the interview, but I did the talk that I'll be doing when I come to Copenhagen. I did this talk in Helsinki about 9 months ago, and when I went back to Helsinki 6 months later, so 3 months ago, one of the participants came up to me and he said, "I'm so glad you're back." He says, "I took the things that you taught in your little workshop and I applied them in my business, and I added 100,000 euros profit to my company in 6 months." Now, so I want to point out, this is not somebody who came to one of my seminars or one of my multi-day workshops. They didn't hire me or any of my consultants. They just came to the evening presentation like the one you guys are going to come to, and they learned enough right there to apply the skills and create real profits. And the reason that's so exciting to me is too many salespeople too many business owners are worried all the time about revenue. And what I want to do is show you that doesn't have to be the big worry. You can revenue, sales can become easy. And now with that handled, you can focus on real things like how to hire the right people, how to grow your business, how to professionally develop yourself, and so on.
Yeah. And you know, just on a personal note, for the past month or so, we have been experimenting with Inception Marketing at Speakers Club. And we are slowly picking it up and you know, getting the hold of it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, you know. It is, and as you say, it actually gives you that sensation that things comes around more easily. And
they do, because
it do. So
sorry.
No, I'm just saying it's great. It's fun, and you know, I can feel that we're getting better at it all the time, and I really enjoy it, and so does my staff. So it's thanks for that.
You're very welcome.
Aaron?
I'm glad to help.
Is one of the reasons that Inception Marketing works so well also that you sort of bypass the need for working on people's objections? Because if it's their own idea, well, how can there be any objections?
Michael, you're singing from the hymn sheet. I mean, that's exactly one of the issues, is that when a prospect comes through an inceptive marketing campaign, they arrive asking, what's the next step?
Yeah.
You know, and that's so different than the old, you know, the old ABC, always be closing, hard-nosed school box selling. Because in the old days, it was like, I'm gonna tell you that this pen, you got to have this pen, and here's all the reasons you have to have this pen. And if you don't have this pen, you know, and like push and push, and if you get it right now, it'll be $20 off. And you know, that old model, it's just not effective. What you want to do is you want a good inception marketing campaign allows you to build credibility for yourself. It builds authority for you or your company. It creates reciprocity with the customer, so the customer feels the desire to keep doing business with you. A really good campaign will create virality because people will share your marketing because your marketing is so good. I'm going to give you an idea. Here's a good example of an inceptive campaign. I had nothing to do with it. I just saw it yesterday. So what happened was Richard Branson wrote in, and he's probably my most significant business mentor. You know, Richard Branson wrote a blog that said, I'm going to answer all these virgin rumors, hashtag virgin rumors. And so there was this whole blog about these rumors. Rumor number one, we're opening the first virgin hotel in Chicago. Yes, this is true. We are. Rumor number two, that you will only be able to text the concierge because everything will be done by text. This is not true. You can text the concierge, you can call the concierge, you can visit them in person, you can send them a telegram, you can send smoke signals if you want. And the whole article kept going on with all these rumors. All it was a PR piece telling you that they have a new Virgin hotel happening in Chicago. And I'm telling you right now, the next time I'm in Chicago, I'm going to stay there.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Enjoy it.
Oh, and by the way, just to continue the thought here, didn't I say that a good inceptive campaign has some virality to it? Well, didn't I just share Richard Branson's campaign? Doesn't that mean automatically that he's getting? There's a whole ton of people live watching right now. You guys are going to publish this, the podcast. All these people are going to hear about Richard's new hotel, and they didn't pay us for that advertising at all. Smart.
Yeah, and he's not even paying you.
No.
Not this time. Not yet. So can we just ask? Maybe we should just a few more words on marketing, right? And then let's move on to another topic. But I have one question. Do you see marketing as a core competence for an entrepreneur, or something that you can just as well outsource?
I'm not sure that that's a proper either-or question. What I mean is that, you know, a really good either-or question is, do you see it as a core competency or something that's not so important? But what you're saying is, do you see it as a core competency or something that they can outsource? And what I'm saying is that, you know, marketing should come like on the list of priorities right behind oxygen. So there's oxygen, and then there's marketing.
Exactly.
But in terms of how that marketing gets delivered, that could be done in-house or outsourced, as long as whoever's handling it really is focused on it. And so quite often it's better if it's outsourced. You know, I had the great privilege of spending a number of years working with Chet Holmes, who was a true, you know, marketing genius and a brilliant guy. And I know, for example, he went to go work with Homex, which is the second largest home construction company in Mexico, and Homex basically outsourced their marketing to Chet's company and to Chet and a friend of mine, Gene McNaughton. It outsourced the marketing to them, and then later attributed $800 million in new growth to having outsourced that marketing to them. And so, you know, and I know that we've worked with clients where we're simply advising them. You know, we had our little call the other day, you and I and one of your marketing guys, remember? And, you know, that's just me giving you some advice. At the end, you're going to go roll it out. But some of our clients would ask us to actually do it for them. I am okay with either model as long as real dedication is being applied to it.
Wow. Yeah. But you know, it's like it's almost holy, right? So that was why I'm, you know, I guess you better have it in house. That's my opinion anyway. So
Thomas, here's what I would say to you. I would say to you that if your inclination is to have it in house, then maybe you shouldn't. And I'm teasing you a little bit, but one of the reasons is I happen to know about you that you like to have control. It's normal. It's normal as an entrepreneur. And so as a consequence of that, you're like, whoa, I really would like to have that in-house. But what if somebody came along and said, Thomas, I could create a Facebook campaign for you. We just need you to go record, say, 3-4 videos. We're going to create the campaign for you, and we'll put 200 people in your next event. We'll take care of the whole thing. Just write us a check for X dollars.
I'd hire him.
Yeah, you'd hire him, and that's what I'm getting at, is that I think outsourcing some of those things, as long as you risk mitigate and you check references and that sort of stuff, I think is an extremely valuable idea. So I believe that you know, you might remember mini exits. We talked about mini exits when we were in Copenhagen and roll maps. Right. We'll definitely do that again. I really think that's a powerful exercise for you to be doing in your business, and you might want to add one extra step, and that is circle any of the boxes that maybe you could outsource. And outsourcing some different marketing activities might be useful to you. You mentioned Richard as being one of your big mentors. I don't know if Chet Holmes, he's dead now, of course, but if he was one of your mentors also. But can you name a few of your other mentors, Eric? Absolutely. Well, you know, I think I should really I should start at the beginning. You know, when I was a kid, of, I don't know, say 19 or so, I went to go work for my first sort of real, first real job. And I would regard the employer or the business owner in that case to be one of my first mentors. And I really helped him start the company. I was the first full-time employee of the company. And over the next 6 years, we'd grow that business to 150 employees in countries, all over the place. And it was a lot of fun. And he really taught me a great deal. Unfortunately, he taught me as much about what to do as about what not to do. And as a consequence of that, I decided to leave that business. But before leaving that business, something really fascinating happened for me, and that was that my girlfriend, right out of high school, she went to go work for a family in Vancouver, and they had 4 children. And I have a weird thing with kids. I'm like a bit of a Pied Piper with children. If I go to a party with 50 adults and 20 children, somehow I always end up at the kids' table. I don't know what's going on there. And anyway, what happened is she would my girlfriend at the time, she would always have a hard time kind of getting the kids to go to bed, and so she'd always call me, "Could you come over and put these kids to bed?" So I would come over, and as soon as I got there, they would, I'd get them in line. And so after she left that job, the family would still call me. Eric, would you come and take the kids to a hockey game? I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And so they kind of ended up adopting me, and I kind of became, an adopted member of their family. And they were very, very wealthy. They were a very wealthy family, and they didn't live overtly wealthy, but it was clear that they were. I mean, today I think they own 2 jets, just to put it in perspective what I mean by wealthy, right? I'm not talking wealthy, they have a nice car, 2 jets. So
always good to have an extra.
Always, you have to have a backup jet, Thomas. I was shocked that you and I got in that little speedboat and we didn't have a backup speedboat. Next time it's got to be a pair of boats, Miami Vice style, down the water.
Yeah, exactly. Eric, we have a question from the public, from Sissy. I don't know if you can see it. Otherwise, I can read it to you.
No, that's really odd. I don't see it.
Okay. She asked, who was the first mentor you made reference to just now? Could you just repeat that maybe for her?
Well, okay. So the first one was my initial employer, who will who I will not name, because there are times in the press when I've been quite honest about my relationship with him, and I don't name him because I'm sure he's grown since then and what have you. Okay. And the second one is a private family mentor of mine, and the one I was just describing. And I'll tell you why he was really fascinating to me is that I'm sure you know Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and so on. Right. I often kind of joked around that I should write Rich Dad, Poor Dad 2, like TOO, also. And the reason is, my father's a highly intelligent guy, lawyer by trade, but I mean he could just as easily discuss foreign policy and product liability with the best of them, and then he could switch over and have a beautiful conversation with Stephen Hawking. He's just a very brilliant guy, and does not have a great relationship with money, or doesn't like money very much, or whatever the case is. Whereas my adopted father had a totally different relationship with money. And so I started making some observations about the different thinking that is applied to wealth and not wealth and so on. And what's fascinating is the year that my girlfriend went to work for that family, the very next year I doubled my income. Consider that. I was 22, 21 years old. I doubled my income, and then I doubled it again and doubled it one more year. So I was literally earning 10 times as much money as any of my friends were, and it was really largely because I had a great mentor. And then since then, I mean, obviously Tony Robbins has been a huge influence on me ever since I was a kid. One of my great privileges in life was getting an invite 2 years ago to start to go and speak at a bunch of Tony's events, and I got to know him personally, and that's been a real privilege to me. Chet Holmes, who you mentioned, has always been a strong mentor. I say always. I mean, I really first came into contact with Chet about 4 or 5 years ago, and we just became really good friends. And he just really influenced me a lot. And it turned out that a lot of the marketing stuff that I'd been working on for years, it turned out that he had been managing a company that I worked for when I was 19 years old. We didn't know each other back then. So some of his marketing brilliance had trickled its way down to me. So many things that I think of as original, they're actually very similar. And so it was a real privilege when he and I got to meet. Because it's funny, when we first met, he's like, "You must be one of my students." And I said, "No." And he goes, "But I look at the way you do marketing." I said, "No." He goes, "You've read my book?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry." I met him at Alex Mendocian's Christmas party. I'd never heard of him before. And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm really embarrassed." I said, "I'm Canadian. I didn't grow up in America. I'd never met you before." Six months later, I was having dinner with him and his wife, and we started comparing histories, and we found the connection point where we had kind of met, even if we'd never met. So those are just some examples of some of the mentors. And then I've had private coaches and mentors that I've hired over the years to help me get through different things in my business that have always been really helpful to me as well.
So obviously having a mentor or several mentors is, I guess, one of your tips to entrepreneurs. Could you what else would you wish that entrepreneurs they understood?
So let's touch on the mentors issue. First of all, I mean, honest to goodness, if there are business owners or entrepreneurs that are on this call and they're not, they haven't hired themselves a coach or got themselves a good business mentor, and you don't always have to hire one. I mean, now that I do it professionally, I don't do this so often, but for years, if people asked me for mentorship, in fact, I was a volunteer mentor at the Prince's Trust in England. And so that meant that these people with their startup businesses would bring their business applications to the Prince's Trust, and the Prince's Trust would give them a small amount of money and then assign them to a business mentor, and I was one of those mentors. And I did it for free. I did it as a volunteer activity. In fact, I am now registered as a business mentor through the Virgin Startup Campaign, so I can do the same thing again, and I'll take on one or two kind of pro bono clients that way. But you'd be surprised as a business owner that quite often the leaders of industry and the leaders of business that are around you are available. And I'll tell you the simplest strategy. You walk up and you say, "Hi, can I buy you lunch?" Because I'll tell you right now, I don't know why I fall for it every time. People go, "Can I buy you lunch?" I'm like, "Oh, if I've got time, yeah, let's go have lunch." And then I realized that for a $200 lunch, they just got $5,000 worth of consulting from me. But the good news is I use that trick myself all the time.
It's a good trick. And for $200, there has to be some good wine in there as well. Anyway.
Well, in some cases, maybe that's happening. So that's one tip, is to make absolutely sure that you get solid business mentors in your life. And here's one thing as well. Never hire a business coach that hasn't hired their own. Like, if you're hiring a life coach or a business coach that doesn't have a coach, what does that tell you about their belief about coaching?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a key thing. And also network, community.
Yeah.
Thomas, I think you're quite lucky because the kind of business you're in keeps you around a lot of really interesting speakers, and so you get to draw from them on a regular basis. But most business owners don't have that as a resource. In fact, you'll know this from your previous businesses, and maybe sometimes even now, that business often feels like an incredibly lonely undertaking. No, and I remember I share this story quite often. I said this from stage once. I said, and I had my business and I was just lonely. And so my wife asked me later, she goes, "What do you mean you were lonely? I mean, you had staff and suppliers and you're talking to people all the time and customers. Like, how could you be lonely?" And I said, "You're right. I wasn't lonely. I was alone." Yeah. Because when you're the business owner, you're alone. You're the one that's in charge. The buck stops with you. The responsibility is yours. Yeah. And so we quite often feel very isolated as a business owner. And one of the reasons is, of course, you can't go and complain to all your staff about how crap you're feeling because you're the one who's supposed to be communicating certainty to everybody. Exactly. And so one of the very key things that I would say to everybody is get to networking events. Connect with other business owners. You want some that are, here's what you want. If you want a great team of business owners around you, I'll tell you the formula right now. Are you ready?
Yep.
Here goes. You want some business owners that have businesses that are smaller or newer than yours. And the reason is that sometimes the very best way for us ever to learn and truly apply things in our lives is through teaching. And then you want some business owners that are exactly the same as you in terms of the size of their business so that you know that they're going through the same things you're going through, so you're no longer alone. So you can talk and share. And then you want some people on your team that are doing much better than you are. And the reason being is that we typically end up earning the average amount of money of the 6 people that are closest around us. Or our businesses will grow at there's a strange force at work that when we're around people who are doing better than us, it pulls us along. And so that's how I think and where do you meet these people? I'll tell you right now, and you already know the answer to this, but I'm telling you right now, you meet them at places like Elevate, at Speakers Club, you go to networking events where other entrepreneurs are looking for answers, and then you connect with them. And whatever shyness you're feeling and whatever reluctance you're feeling, you get over that stuff, and you walk up, you introduce yourself to people and say, "Hey, I don't want to be alone anymore. Let's rock the world together." And I have to say, it's one of the reasons it's one of the reasons I love doing what I'm doing, because then I get to do events like the kind you guys put on. I am so excited about Elevate 2014 because look, with 1,000 people there, tell me you can't build a good mastermind team.
No, exactly. I mean, you know, one of my favorite sayings is that personal development is a team sport, and I mean that, you know, because it is. You know, it's you developing personally, but always together with like-minded people who can lift you, right? You know, I always have the opinion that if I enter a group and I'm the most clever guy, then I'm in the wrong group, you know. I'm in the wrong group. I got to get in a group, you know, with people that are, you know, much more clever than me and have the skills that I don't. So I totally.
Thomas, what I want to know is, does that happen to you a lot or not very often?
Not very often. Don't worry. Not very often. But you know, anyway, Eric. Actually, we have a question here on the panel from Maria. She asks, would you agree that marketing people are like illusionists? They sell to mind.
Would I say that marketing people are like illusionists? Well, I think that can happen. I think there are some that are that way. I have certainly experienced ones that are like that. Here's my feeling for you is that really great persuasion skills, really good powers of influence are kind of like the Force from Star Wars. There's the light side and there's the dark side. And, you know, so you know, there are some people who would be illusionists in the sense that they would sell things that don't exist, and I've certainly seen that many times. I've seen. I remember distinctly seeing a business speaker from Asia who was unbelievably good illusionist. In fact, he's a literal magician and a great illusionist. And quite often he'd be standing on stage and he'd be explaining how these amazing things are happening all around us you know, and then you'd find out that they were actually in his head. You know, that they weren't yet real. And so now the challenge with that is that I think every entrepreneur has to have that skill. They have to be able to see what's not yet real in order to create it.
Right.
And there comes a point when you're selling what's not yet real. If you don't disclose that it's not yet real, then you're being a dark side illusionist. And I don't agree with that. So
Right.
On the other side, I think that if you're great at painting pictures, which is no longer an illusion, if you're great at painting pictures of things that are real, and you're able to take the audience and immerse them in that picture so that they can feel the delivery, if they can go, wow, I can see how this is going to improve my life. You know, and I'll tell you one of the big differences. This is really simple. Oftentimes I'll go and do a talk, like when we come to Copenhagen. I'll come to Copenhagen. And obviously we're coming because we're hoping people will decide to continue the journey and come to Elevate, or they'll come to one of my programs or what have you. Yeah. One of my goals is, and I'll tell you right now, every single person who comes to our events in Aarhus in Copenhagen, I will give you enough value that will more than pay for your ticket to Elevate. No question about that. That doesn't mean you have to go.
No, I know that. No.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it. You've seen it from your audience before. And so that's not illusion. You see the difference? Illusion is you see a speaker speak and you feel very good and optimistic, but you don't have any action to take. The only way to get the value is to buy something. Whereas a great delivery gives value up front, and so you go, oh, I get that. I'm in. That makes sense to me.
Again, you know, the fundamental principle of networking, and you are a great network. You know, always start by giving, but let people understand that there's so much more. But always start by giving, so people they are you know, happy, and they feel that they got something from you. You know, the number one principle in networking, and you apply it in your teaching, and I love it. And we already learned so much just from that session we had in Copenhagen in June, right?
Yeah,
June,
not so long ago.
No, that's not long ago. Anyway,
I think it might be a little colder.
I just want to say something.
Okay, let's hear Michael. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah. The way I see it and talking about inception marketing is that we've all seen these paintings where all of a sudden you can see something completely different. There's a famous thing where you see a woman, then all of a sudden you see something different. That I think what a true market does is explain you what's really there so you can see it yourself. And then that's part of the inception marketing, right? Is that when people go, oh, now I can see what's really there. And then you have the...
I think Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. By the way, I should let everybody know that Michael is coming to us from visiting hours at some institution we don't know of. It's the echo, and it's hilarious. But Michael, I think you're onto something there, and I'm looking forward to your feedback from the talk as well. Here's a great way for me to explain it. Imagine a great coach or a great therapist. Now, a great coach or a great therapist is sitting listening to their client, and the client is giving them the story. You know, what's wrong? How does it manifest? What did their father do to them? You know, all that stuff in the past, right? Now, the great therapist or the great coach is listening to all this, and suddenly they go, I know what the problem is, and I know what the solution is. A poor coach or a poor therapist will at this point give that theory and that solution to the prospect, to the client. And this is how it'll work. The client's going, well, this happened to me, and then this happened, and then I was afraid of this, and then this happened, and then the coach will go, oh, I know what happened. When your dad did this, you thought this, and you created that meaning, and if you instead realize this, then you'll feel better about yourself. Then the client says something like this. Yeah, you might be right. But still, there was this other time, and they go back on, right? Now, a great therapist or a great coach will handle that differently. What they'll do is they'll hear the story, and then they will ask questions or relay stories that will have the client realize the truth on their own. In other words, the truth will have an inception inside their own head instead of being told. Now they can own the solution and take credit for it, and they can heal. Now, that is the principle that we're applying in inception marketing with the prospect. When somebody says to you, Michael, I'm sure you've had this happen. You know, you go on a vacation to the Mediterranean or the Caribbean or Africa or something, and you say to your friend, "Oh, I'm going off to the Bahamas," and then some friend says, "I've always wanted to do that." Yeah. Well, they're lying. Because they haven't always wanted to do that at all, right? I mean, they haven't. They didn't come out. They weren't born, get smacked on the bottom, and then go, I've always wanted to go to the Caribbean, right? Like, there came a point in time in their life where they realized that they wanted to go. And really good marketing creates that feeling in people, that it was their own realization and that they always wanted it. That's inception.
Yeah. And we're gonna learn a lot more about that already on the 12th and on the 18th, and of course there's gonna be a lot more on that and a lot of other business mastery topics when you come around on Elevate. Eric, I think that we are slightly overdue. I had a great time, and I'm sorry that Michael, we kind of ignored you a little bit, but you know the sound from the was really bad. So Eric, you know, 1,000 million thanks for hooking up with Michael and me.
No problem. There's something I wanted to get just before we go somewhere. There's a couple of people that I see registered here, and I just want to say hello to them. I wanted to say hello to Ragnar and Maria and Victor and Sissy, and also it's funny, I see Peter Morris is in here, and he actually, I did an interview a couple of days ago in Sweden, and he was on that call. I wanted to say hi to Peter because what's really neat about Peter is that Peter worked at a big retail chain in England that was one of my clients at my first company in England. So it's whenever I see him log into one of my interviews, I always love it because, you know, not only was he a great client and a great advocate within within the business that he worked in, but he would actually help us win business from other clients. He was one of those clients that you just love to stay connected with. So it's been years and years and years since I sold that company, and I love that I get to stay connected. And Peter, it's always great to have you on here. So I just wanted to say hi to a few of those people that I saw registered. Wow, fantastic! Wow, lifelong friends. That's great. Is Peter living in Scandinavia now? No, he's in the UK, and it's so funny because I think I was in Cyprus a few days ago or a few weeks ago, and it turned out that he was in Cyprus at the same time, but we weren't at the same point on the island. So, now, just remind me, guys, when I'm doing an event in Aarhus. What day is that one on? The Aarhus event is on the 18th of September. Okay. And there's a lot of info about it on www.speakersclub.dk. Excellent. You can get all exact details about the venue and the time slot, etc. And the other event is on the 12th of September,
It's going to be in the afternoon at our office at the Speakers Club head of Copenhagen. And actually, on the 12th, there's going to be another another speech with you. Sorry, but actually, it is kind of a show. It's very entertaining, you know. But
there will be no singing or dancing.
No, but you know, it is very entertaining. You know, you learn a lot, but it's still very entertaining. But actually, you know, we actually got you on as the head speaker on the biggest Danish convention for entrepreneurs, which you call Iværk Vækst, which is, and you're going to speak in the morning on the Friday the 12th.
And I can do that in English, right? My Danish is rusty.
Oh, fuck, I forgot that. Didn't I tell you?
Well,
that'd be fine.
The bottom line is that there are some really good opportunities for me to connect with everybody else that's around Denmark all through this month, and then for the rest of you, I am doing 18 events in 16 cities in 8 countries all around Northern Europe, from Iceland to Finland. So I hope I get to connect with all of you at some point live during these events, and I want to thank you guys for facilitating the interview here, and I'm looking forward to sharing the podcast with our people once you've got it published.
Yeah, exactly, and thanks for that, and for your help on all the technology here. Have a great evening, Eric, and thanks to you, Michael, and thanks to everyone who's been listening in. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.